It was supposed to be a simple internship, nothing dramatic, just credit hours, caffeine, and hours of squinting at negatives in a dusty photo archive. I was a photography student working at a small but proud arts magazine in downtown Los Angeles during the summer of 1981. Most of my days were quiet. Just me, the hum of old film scanners, and endless stacks of contest submissions from amateur photographers. It was fun at first, seeing all the weird, wonderful ways people try to make art. Then came the envelope. It was large, yellowed, with no return address. Just a neat label on the front, J.M. Berger archival entry. Inside were a few dozen black and white prints, all beautifully composed. Grainy, moody shots of people in empty places, diners, parking lots, motel lobbies. All the subjects were alone, none of them smiling. At first I thought it was a street photography series, maybe like a study on isolation. The artist clearly had talent. The use of light and shadow was, honestly, expert. But you know, something about the images made me uneasy. Every person looked distracted, as if they weren't aware they were being photographed. Or if they were, they weren't exactly comfortable with it. One photo stood out, a woman sitting on a bench at a bus terminal, staring directly at the lens, lips slightly parted. Her eyes said something, but I couldn't tell what. Was it fear, confusion, or maybe recognition? I showed the prints to my supervisor. He said they were haunting, but brilliant. We agreed to shortlist the submission for a feature. So a week later, we received the negatives. Berger had mailed them in at our request, a thick strip of 35mm film, neatly labeled and carefully stored. I took them to the darkroom to begin developing a few more prints. That's when I noticed it. The last few frames on the strip weren't of the same subjects. They looked older, dustier, with more contrast, different people entirely. One image showed a small group gathered in a waiting room, but one figure, a young man, was oddly faded, almost like he wasn't really there. Another showed an empty chair and a coat draped over it. The jacket looked newer than the furniture in the room, like it didn't belong. And then I found her. She appeared in just one frame, a young woman standing on a train platform, backlit by sunset. She was looking at the photographer, but not like a model looks at a lens. It was warmer, familiar even. She looked like she knew whoever took the photo. There was something else, something I couldn't explain. I'd seen her before. I went back through our archives, years of old contest entries, portfolios, resumes, and found a nearly identical photo submitted over a decade earlier. Same girl, same platform, same look. But the name on that entry wasn't Berger. It was someone named Daniel H. Mercer, a photographer who, according to a brief obituary in our files, had died in 1972. Car accident, age 26. Goosebumps crawled up my arms. How could the same subject, with the same expression at the same place, appear in two separate entries, submitted 10 years apart, from two different photographers? I brought it up to my editor. He brushed it off. Recreations. Maybe Berger is doing a homage. But the photo's timestamp is wrong, I said. The film stock. It's not even made anymore. This was shot in the 70s, at latest. He raised an eyebrow. You think someone faked a photo to enter an art contest? I didn't push it, but honestly I couldn't let it go. I wrote to the return address listed in Berger's second envelope. Then, weeks passed. No reply. Eventually the address came back as invalid. We tried calling, but the number had been disconnected. I started asking around, checked with a professor of mine who specialized in photographic history. I showed her the prints. She stared at them for a long time. You know what's odd, she said. That girl. I think I saw her face once. In a community college yearbook from 1968. She went missing the same year. Disappeared waiting for a train. She pulled out an old microfilm record, and there she was. Same coat, same haircut, same eyes. The photo I had developed, the one Berger sent in, may have been the last image ever taken of her. But what chilled me more was when it was taken. So, the year after she vanished. The negatives were turned over to authorities just in case. I never heard if anything came of it. But the whole episode left me changed. Not because of ghosts, or killers, or crime. But because I learned that images are more than memories. They're messages, sometimes from the past, sometimes from people who never got the chance to speak for themselves. And sometimes, if you're paying close enough attention, they ask you to look again. When I first met Clark, he wore a blazer and a scarf, in August. He introduced himself as Clark Rockefeller, said he was looking for a short-term place to stay in the city while he, transitioned assets and wrapped up a few private transactions. His voice was smooth, Harvard smooth. He said he was looking for quiet, intellectual company. My Craigslist ad had said grad student, quiet, no parties. I guess we were a match. We shook hands. His palm was cold. I didn't think twice about letting him move in. Rent in Manhattan is brutal. He offered 3 months in advance, in cash, said he didn't trust banks. They're all infected with idiocy, he said, with a smile that didn't quite touch his eyes. The first 2 weeks were uneventful. He was polite, neat, almost too neat. Never left dishes in the sink, never made noise. But I started noticing little things, weird things. He never got mail, never used the internet. And every time I walked into a room he was already in, he was just sitting there, like he'd been waiting. Once I caught him standing in the dark in the kitchen, just standing there, said he was thinking. He told me he was an art dealer, traveled for work, though I never saw him pack a bag, never saw him leave for a flight. One night I got home earlier than expected. I heard movement in my bedroom. I froze. I lived in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment. He had no reason to be in my room. I opened the door and found him standing by my desk, holding one of my notebooks. He smiled and handed it to me. Just borrowing a pen, he said. My stomach dropped. My pens were in the kitchen. After that, I started locking my door at night. Then came the closet. He always kept his bedroom locked. I never thought much about it until one afternoon, when he forgot. I was looking for a broom and tried the knob out of habit. It opened. Inside, the closet was filled with clothes, but nothing matched. Old suits, new hoodies, women's scarves. There was a pair of children's shoes, and on the top shelf a box of documents. I know I shouldn't have touched them, but I did. Inside were 3 passports, 3 different names. The photos were all Clark, or whoever he was. Different haircuts, different beards, but the same cold, shark-like eyes. One ID said he was from Connecticut, one from California, one from Germany. I backed out of the room and closed the door. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept hearing the faint creak of the hallway floorboards. In the morning, the closet was locked again. Nothing was said. He acted normal, smiled over toast. But something in his eyes had changed. He knew I'd seen. That day I called my cousin, a police officer in Jersey, and told him everything. He said it sounded like identity theft at best. He ran the names. One came up flagged. "Dude," he told me, voice low. "That name's linked to an old cold case out in California. A couple disappeared in the 80s. They were never found." That night I stayed at a friend's place. The next morning the police raided the apartment. Clark was gone. What they found in his room made my skin crawl. A photo of a young girl handcuffed to a radiator. Newspaper clippings, maps. More IDs, dozens of them. And, a detailed floor plan of our apartment, with my bedroom circled in red ink. Days later, they found him in Baltimore, living under yet another name. He'd already tried to rent a boat, probably planning to disappear again. He didn't fight. He just smiled when they cuffed him, like he was disappointed in all of us for figuring it out. His real name was Christian Gerhardsreiter, born in Germany. Came to the United States as a teenager. For decades, he'd posed as a filmmaker, a physicist, a Wall Street banker. He'd even managed to marry a successful businesswoman by pretending to be a Rockefeller. Yes, that Rockefeller. The cold case from California. Well, police dug up a backyard in San Marino. They found bones beneath the concrete. The couple had been renting a guest house to a man named Christopher Chichester. Same guy. I spent weeks, honestly, just trying to understand how close I'd come. Not just to a liar, but to a killer. I'd passed him every day in the hallway, shared the bathroom, laughed over coffee. I remember brushing my teeth one night while he stood in the hallway behind me, talking about postmodern sculpture. He could have killed me then. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment. Sometimes I still wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, thinking I heard the front door open. He's serving time now, not for murder, oddly, but for kidnapping his daughter from a supervised visit, But they know what he did. We all know now. He's a phantom with a smile and a name for every state. And I almost called him my friend.